I remember the exact moment I stopped believing, though I could not name it then. It was not dramatic. There was no thunder from the heavens, no voice of demons whispering corruption into my willing ear. It happened in the silence between one prayer and the next, in the space where certainty should have lived, but found only the cold architecture of doubt. I knelt in the chapel of our convent on sanctified hope. That was what they called the world, though hope had been strip-mined from its crust centuries before I arrived, and I spoke the litany of faith as I had spoken it 10,000 times before, and the words tasted like ash. Not the sacred ash we mixed with our rations to remind us of mortality, but the ash of something burned that should not have burned, something precious rendered into nothing but grey dust on my tongue. My name was Celeste, is Celeste. They have not taken that from me yet, though they have taken nearly everything else. I served in the Order of the Bleeding Rose, 2nd Company, 4th Squad under Canoness Superior Agatha. I had been a Sister of Battle for 16 years. I had killed heretics on 7 worlds. I had stood in the fire of orbital bombardment and felt nothing but the Emperor's grace shielding me. I had watched my sisters die beside me and known with the certainty that faith provides that they went to sit at his side in glory eternal. I had been certain. The Emperor protects. The Emperor provides. The Emperor is our shield and our sword. I had believed these things the way I believed my heart would beat. My lungs would draw breath. My blood would flow. They were not articles of faith but facts of existence, as immutable as gravity, as undeniable as death, until they were not. The mission had been routine. That is what they told us in the briefing, what Canoness Superior Agatha repeated as we boarded the Aquila landers, what I told myself as we descended through the acid clouds of Hive World Mordian's 7th moon. Routine. A cult had taken root in the Underhive, corrupting the workers, spreading blasphemy among the foundry crews. We would purge them. We would burn out the infection. We would restore the Emperor's light to those dark places. I had done this before. We had all done this before. The Adepta Sororitas exists for this purpose, to be the Emperor's wrath made manifest, to cleanse the unclean, to kill in his name with holy fire and blessed bolter. The Underhive stank of chemical runoff and human waste, and the particular smell of recycled air pushed through filtration systems that had not been replaced in centuries. The lumens flickered with irregular current, casting everything in stuttering yellow light. My armor's servo motors hummed their familiar hymn as I moved through the corridors behind Sister Superior Mathilde. My bolter was loaded with blessed ammunition, each shell inscribed with prayer script by the convent sanctifiers. My flamer fuel had been consecrated by the canoness herself. I wore the red and white of my order across ceramite plate that had protected 3 sisters before me, their names etched into the interior surface so their spirits might watch over me in battle. I was ready. I was faithful. I was certain. The cult had converted an old manufactorum into their gathering place. We could hear them before we saw them, hundreds of voices raised in something that was almost song but wrong, discordant, the melody bending in ways that made my back teeth ache. Sister Superior Mathilde made the hand signal for combat formation, and we moved into position. 12 sisters in power armor surrounding the entrance to the hab block where the noise originated. The plan was simple. We would breach, identify the cult leaders, execute them, then give the workers one chance to renounce their heresy. Those who recanted would be marked for re-education. Those who refused would burn. When we breached the doors, I saw them, hundreds of them, workers in their grey industrial garments, their faces gaunt from malnutrition, their bodies bearing the scars of industrial accidents and the augmetic replacements that came after crude mechanical limbs, basic optic implants, respiratory systems patched with corroded tubing. They were packed into what had once been an assembly floor, standing shoulder to shoulder, swaying together as they chanted. And at the center of the crowd, elevated on a makeshift pulpit constructed from cargo pallets, stood their preacher. He was an old man. That was the first thing I noticed. Ancient, his skin hanging loose on his frame, his augmetic legs barely supporting his weight. He wore workers' coveralls stained with oil and what might have been blood. No demonic corruption twisted his features. No marks of chaos scarred his flesh. He was just an old man, speaking to other desperate people in the dark places beneath the hive where the Emperor's light had never reached. When he saw us, he did not run. He did not call down curses or summon warp-spawned horrors. He simply stopped speaking and looked at us with eyes that held no fear, only a deep and terrible sadness. Sister Superior Mathilde raised her bolter. I raised mine. We all raised ours. 12 barrels pointed at hundreds of unarmed workers. The old man raised his hands not in surrender but in a gesture of blessing toward the people gathered before him. He spoke. His voice was rough from decades of breathing bad air, but it carried clearly in the sudden silence. "Do not be afraid," he said. "The Emperor loves you. He has always loved you. You are his children, even if his servants have forgotten you." That should have been our signal. Those words claiming the Emperor's love for heretics, for those who had turned from his light, that was enough. More than enough. Sister Superior Mathilde gave the order, and we opened fire. The blessed bolts exploded into the crowd. Bodies came apart in sprays of red and grey. The screams started immediately. That particular sound of mass panic, of hundreds of people trying to flee in all directions at once with nowhere to go. My bolter kicked against my shoulder with each shot, the recoil absorbed by my armor's stabilizers. I was steady. I was controlled. I was doing the Emperor's work. But the old man did not try to flee. He stood on his pulpit as the people around him died, stood there with his arms outstretched in that gesture of blessing, and he looked directly at me. Not at all of us. At me. His eyes met mine through my helmet's visor, and I saw something there that made my finger freeze on the trigger. Not hatred, not accusation, not even fear, just sorrow. Deep and infinite sorrow. And in that moment, in that fraction of a second before Sister Mathilde's shot took him in the chest and exploded him into meat and bone fragments, I heard his voice in my head, though his lips did not move. "He has forgotten you too, daughter. You just do not know it yet." Then he was gone, scattered across the people he had been trying to save, and we continued firing until the screaming stopped. The silence after was worse than the noise had been. That silence filled with the drip of blood and the settling of bodies and the chemical smell of bolter propellant mixing with the stench of opened flesh. We advanced through the killing floor, checking for survivors, administering the Emperor's mercy to those too wounded to save. I performed my duty. I did what I had been trained to do, but something had broken inside me in that moment when the old man looked at me. Some structural support that had held up the architecture of my faith, and I could feel the weight beginning to shift, the foundation beginning to crack. After action prayers felt hollow. The words came from my mouth automatically, recited from years of conditioning, but they meant nothing. They were just sounds. When the Canoness Superior commended us for our faithful service, I heard the praise but could not feel it. When we burned the bodies in the standard purification ritual, I watched the flames consume the dead and could only think about the old man's face, his eyes, his final unspoken words. What if he had been right? What if the Emperor had forgotten us? What if we were killing people who simply wanted to believe that someone, somewhere, cared whether they lived or died in the darkness? These were dangerous thoughts, heretical thoughts. I recognized them as such even as they formed. I should have reported myself to the Canoness immediately, confessed my doubts, accepted whatever penance was required to restore my faith. The Adepta Sororitas has procedures for this. We are all tested at some point. Doubt is the enemy's weapon, but it can be defeated through prayer, through mortification of the flesh, through renewed dedication to duty. I should have sought help. I did not. Instead, I carried the doubt with me. I let it grow. And over the weeks that followed, I began to see things I had not allowed myself to see before. The way the Canoness spoke of the common people with barely disguised contempt, referring to them as the masses or the faithful herd, with the same tone one might use for livestock. The way we requisitioned food and supplies from local populations already starving, taking it as our due because we served the emperor, and they should be grateful for the privilege of feeding us. The way Sister Superior Mathilde executed a woman for heresy because the woman had argued that her children should be allowed to keep more of the rations they had grown instead of sending it all as tithes to the hive above. The way we burned books we could not read, destroyed art we did not understand, killed people who had committed no crime except refusing to repeat the words we demanded, they say. I watched, and I saw, and the doubt spread through me like rot through wood. It ate away at everything I had believed. If the emperor loved humanity, why did his servants treat humans with such cruelty? If we were the guardians of the faithful, why did we inspire terror instead of hope? If our faith was true and righteous, why did it require so much death to maintain? These questions had no good answers. I tried to find them in prayer, in the sacred texts, in consultation with the convent's dialogus, but every answer I received only raised more questions, and the foundation of my certainty continued to crumble. 3 months after the manufacturing massacre, I had started thinking of it as a massacre rather than a purge. Another sign of my failing faith, we received new orders. A penal colony on the far edge of the system had reported signs of demonic corruption among the prisoner population. We were to investigate and, if necessary, purge the entire facility. This was considered a significant honor. Daemon cults were serious threats, and being chosen to face them directly meant the canoness trusted our faith was strong enough to resist corruption. I accepted the assignment because I had no choice, but in my heart, I felt nothing but dread. The penal colony was built into an asteroid, a sphere of rock and ice, carved hollow to house those the Imperium had condemned, but not killed. Most of the prisoners were petty criminals, thieves, black marketeers, those who had failed to pay their tithes, sentenced to decades of labor in the mining operations that supplied ore to the system's forges. The facility was administered by the Adepta Sororitas, overseen by a judge named Brenner, who greeted us with the cold formality of his order. He briefed us in his office, a cramped room that smelled of recycled air and old parchment, explaining that the corruption had begun approximately 6 weeks prior in cell block Delta. The prisoners started experiencing shared dreams, Judge Brenner said, his augmetic eye clicking as it adjusted focus between us. At first, the guards dismissed it as the natural result of poor air quality and stress, but the dreams grew more specific. The prisoners described a voice speaking to them, offering freedom, offering power. 3 days ago, we found symbols carved into the walls of a dozen cells. The marks matched descriptions of chaos glyphs from the Arbeitsfield manual. He showed us picked captures of the symbols. They were crude, scratched into metal with improvised tools, but unmistakable: the 8-pointed star, the open eye, the serpent eating its tail. These were the marks of corruption, the calling cards of the ruinous powers. This should have filled me with righteous fury, with the desire to cleanse the taint immediately. Instead, I felt only exhaustion. How many times would we do this? How many times would we find desperate people turning to anything, even damnation, because they saw no hope anywhere else? We descended into the prison levels with Judge Brenner and a squad of Arbeits enforcers. The corridors were narrow, lit by failing lumens that created more shadows than light. The air tasted of metal and fear. We could hear the prisoners before we reached them, not chanting this time but singing. Actual singing, voices raised in something that sounded almost joyful, almost beautiful. It made my skin crawl, not because it was horrible but because it was not. Because these condemned people sounded happier than I had heard anyone sound in months. Cell block Delta had been sealed from the inside. The prisoners had somehow overridden the locking mechanisms and barricaded themselves behind reinforced doors. Judge Brenner ordered his enforcers to begin cutting through with plasma torches while we established a defensive perimeter. The singing continued, growing louder as the enforcers worked. I tried to listen to the words but could not make them out clearly. They were not in Gothic, or if they were, they had been so distorted that the original language was unrecognizable. When the doors finally fell, we advanced with weapons ready, expecting immediate resistance. Instead, we found the prisoners sitting peacefully in rows, facing the center of the common area, where someone had constructed an altar from prison materials, bunks dismantled and reassembled, blankets dyed with what looked like blood, offerings of food arranged on salvaged metal plates. And behind the altar stood a woman. She wore prisoner's grey like all the others, but there was something different about her. Not physical corruption, her flesh showed no signs of mutation, no tentacles or scales or any of the usual marks of chaos, but there was a presence to her, an intensity that made the air around her seem to shimmer with heat that was not heat, with light that was not light. She looked at us without fear or anger, her expression serene, almost compassionate. "You have come to kill us," she said. Her voice was soft, gentle even, but it carried to every corner of the block. "We expected this. The Imperium does not tolerate those who see beyond its lies." Sister Superior Mathild did not hesitate. She fired her bolter directly at the woman. The shot should have removed her head from her shoulders. Instead, it stopped in mid-air, 3 meters from her body, the bolt shell hanging frozen in space for one impossible moment, before falling to the floor with a metallic clatter, unexploded. Every sister in our squad immediately opened fire. A wall of bolt rounds and flamer promethium converged on the altar. None of it reached her. The ammunition stopped. The fire dispersed, and she stood untouched, still wearing that expression of infinite compassion. "You see," she said, addressing not us but the prisoners around her, "they fear what they cannot control. They kill what they do not understand. They claim to serve a God who loves humanity, but they are the first to pull the trigger when humanity asks for that love to mean something." I should have felt horror at this display of warp power. I should have recognized it as proof of demonic corruption. I should have called for immediate withdrawal and orbital bombardment of the entire facility. Instead, I found myself lowering my bolter slightly, listening to her words, and realizing with creeping dread that I agreed with them. When had I last seen the Imperium show love? When had I last seen us offer anything but death and suffering to those we claimed to protect? When had the Emperor's mercy looked like actual mercy rather than a euphemism for execution? The woman continued speaking. "I am no daemon," she said, and I believed her. "I am simply someone who asked the wrong questions and found answers the Imperium did not want me to find. These people are not cultists. They are prisoners who committed minor crimes, theft, mostly, or failure to meet impossible production quotas, and they were given a choice. Accept damnation from the Imperium, or accept damnation from elsewhere, and at least know they were choosing it, rather than having it imposed. They chose knowledge over ignorance. They chose freedom over chains." Sister Superior Mathild ordered the Arbites to advance with shock mauls. If our ranged weapons would not work, we would beat the corruption out of them physically. The enforcers moved forward, weapons crackling with power. They made it 2 meters before they stopped, frozen not by visible force but by something invisible, something that held them as easily as a hand might hold insects. The woman shook her head sadly. "You still do not understand," she said. "I am not keeping them here. They are free to leave if they choose, but they will not choose, because they have finally found something worth believing in. Not a God who demands endless suffering in his name. Not an Imperium that grinds them into paste for the crime of existing, but simple truth that they matter, that their lives have value, that they deserve better than what they have received." I wanted to argue. I wanted to denounce her as a liar and heretic. I wanted to feel the righteous fury that should have filled me in the presence of such obvious corruption. Instead, I felt nothing but a hollow ache in my chest where my faith used to live. Because she was right. Everything she said was right. The Imperium did not love these people. It did not love anyone. It was a vast machine that consumed human lives and called the consumption holy, that demanded worship and offered nothing but cruelty in return, that spoke of the Emperor's love while demonstrating nothing but the Emperor's infinite capacity for violence against his own children. The woman looked directly at me then, just as the old preacher had looked at me months before in the manufactorum. She saw my doubt. She saw my broken faith. She saw everything I had been trying to hide from my sisters and myself, and she smiled, not with triumph, but with the same terrible compassion the preacher had shown. "You know," she said, speaking to me alone though everyone could hear her words, "you know the truth. You have known it for a while now. You cannot unknow it. You cannot force yourself to believe again, any more than you can force yourself to unsee something once witnessed. The question is, what you will do with that knowledge. Will you continue to serve a lie because it is comfortable and familiar? Or will you have the courage to admit what you have lost?" I should have shot her. My duty was clear. My vows were unambiguous. I had sworn to destroy the enemies of the Emperor, to purge the heretic and the corrupted, to show no mercy and accept no excuses. This woman was using warp powers. She was spreading corruption among Imperial citizens. She was everything I had been trained to kill. My bolter was in my hands. I only needed to aim and fire. I lowered my weapon. Sister Superior Mathilde saw. Of course she saw. She was watching all of us constantly, as was her duty, ensuring our faith remained strong in the face of corruption. When I lowered my bolter, she knew immediately what it meant. She spun toward me, her own weapon rising, and I saw in her eyes the exact moment she stopped seeing me as her sister and started seeing me as a threat. "Sister Celeste," she said, her voice perfectly controlled, "raise your weapon and fire on the heretic." I could not. The woman at the altar was a heretic by Imperial law. She had committed acts that warranted death, but she was not wrong. That was the crack in my faith that had finally shattered it completely. The realization that being legally guilty did not mean being morally guilty, that the Imperium's laws served the Imperium's interests rather than any abstract standard of justice or righteousness. I had killed so many people who were guilty only of being inconvenient, of asking questions, of wanting something better than endless suffering in the Emperor's name. "I cannot," I said. The words came out barely above a whisper, but in the silence of that moment, they sounded like thunder. Sister Superior Mathilde did not hesitate. She fired her bolter at me. I was still wearing my power armor, still protected by ceramite plate, but at close range, a bolter round will crack even blessed armor. The shot took me in the left shoulder, the impact spinning me sideways, pain exploding through my arm and chest. I stumbled, caught myself against a wall, heard Sister Superior Mathilde racking another round. She would not miss twice. But before she could fire again, the woman at the altar gestured and every weapon in the room ours. The Arbite simply stopped working. Bolters clicked on empty chambers. Power malls went dark. Even Judge Brenner's plasma pistol, which he had drawn in preparation to execute prisoners, died in his hand. We stood there in sudden impotence, predators rendered harmless, and for the first time in 16 years I saw genuine fear in Sister Superior Mathilde's eyes. The prisoners did not attack us. They did not rush forward to overwhelm us with numbers. They simply stood and began filing out of the cell block in orderly lines, walking past us as if we were not there at all. The woman at the altar waited until they had all departed, then approached me where I had collapsed against the wall. She knelt beside me, her hand hovering over my wound without touching it. "I could heal this," she said quietly. "I could do more than heal it. I could give you strength beyond anything the Imperium offers. Power, knowledge, purpose, all the things they promised you and never delivered. I could make you matter in ways the Sisters of Battle never could." I looked up at her, at this heretic who had somehow seen directly into my broken soul, and I knew she was telling the truth. She could do all those things. She had power, real power, not the hollow promises the Imperium wrapped in prayer and called faith. But I had spent 16 years killing people who accepted such offers. I had burned them, shot them, cleansed them with flamer and bolter, because they had chosen corruption over service. And now that I had lost my faith, now that I stood on the other side of that line, I found I could not cross it. Not because of duty or honor or any of the high ideals I had once believed in, but because I was tired. So deeply, horribly tired. "No," I said, "just let me die here. Let this be over." She shook her head. That would be mercy, she said. And the Imperium does not permit mercy. They will take you back. They will interrogate you. They will try to find out what you know, what you have seen, what made you doubt. And when they have extracted everything useful, they will kill you in a way designed to serve as warning to others. You know this. You have participated in such interrogations. I had. Emperor help me, though he would not, could not, did not exist in any form that cared. I had participated in the interrogation and execution of those whose faith had failed. I had watched the torturers work. I had listened to the confessions extracted through pain. I had been present when they performed the final executions, had seen how they made the deaths as public and horrible as possible to discourage others from following the same path. I knew exactly what awaited me. The woman stood. I am sorry, she said, and meant it. I am sorry you cannot believe, and I am sorry you cannot accept what I offer. You are caught between two damnations, able to embrace neither. That is its own kind of hell. I wish I could spare you from it. Then she was gone, walking away with her followers, leaving us standing useless in the cell block with our dead weapons and deader faith. Sister Superior Mathilde recovered first, barking orders to the Arbites to re-establish communications with the surface, to call for reinforcements, to lock down the facility. But I knew it was too late. The corruption had been witnessed, the failure had been documented, and I had broken the most fundamental rule of the Adepta Sororitas. I had refused a direct order to kill a heretic. They took me into custody immediately. Not the Arbites, they lacked authority over a sister of battle, but my own sisters. Mathilde personally stripped me of my armor, piece by piece, removing the sacred ceramite plate I had worn for years, taking away the protection the order had granted me. When I stood before her in just the black body glove we wore beneath our armor, she struck me across the face hard enough to split my lip. You were my sister, she said, and I heard genuine grief in her voice beneath the anger. You were faithful. What happened to you, Celeste? What corruption wormed its way into your heart? I could have said nothing, probably should have said nothing. But I was so tired of lying, of pretending, of maintaining the fiction that everything we did was righteous and just. Truth happened, I said. I saw what we actually do, what we actually are, and I could not keep believing the lies we tell ourselves to justify it. She hit me again. The Emperor protects, she said, each word bitten off sharp. Does he? I asked, tasting blood. Where was his protection for the workers in the manufacturum? For the children in the underhive? For the prisoners in this facility who committed the crime of being poor? Where is his love? Mathilde, where is his mercy? I have served him for 16 years, and I have never, not once, seen either. She did not hit me a third time. Instead, she turned away, her shoulders rigid with tension. You will be transferred to the convent for interrogation by the Order Dialogus and the Canoness. You will confess everything, and then you will be granted the Emperor's mercy. The Emperor's mercy. Death, by flamer most likely, performed publicly so other sisters could witness what happened to those who lost their faith. I had seen it done before. I would burn, and my ashes would be scattered unmarked, and my name would be struck from the convent records, and it would be as if I had never existed. That was the Imperium's way to erase those who questioned, to remove the inconvenient, to pretend that doubt could be burned away and leave no trace. They transported me back to the convent in chains, literal chains, blessed iron wrapped around my wrists and ankles, each link inscribed with prayer script, meant to prevent corruption from spreading. I sat in the hold of the transport surrounded by sisters who would not meet my eyes, who treated me as if I had already become something other than human. The flight took 6 hours. I spent them trying to find some way back to faith, some path that would let me believe again, but there was nothing. The foundation was gone. I could no more force myself to believe than I could force my heart to stop beating through will alone. The Canoness met us on the landing pad. Canoness Superior Agatha, who had commanded our order for 30 years, who had led us in battle on 100 worlds, who I had revered as a living saint. She looked at me with such profound disappointment that I felt it like a physical weight on my chest. "Sister Celeste," she said, "I am told you refused to fire on a heretic. I am told you openly questioned the Emperor's will. I am told your faith has failed." "Yes, Canoness," I said. There seemed no point in denying it. She studied me in silence for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, almost gentle. "Why did you not come to me when you first experienced doubt? We could have helped you. We could have guided you back to faith before it was too late." "Because I did not want to be helped," I said. "Because doubt is not a disease to be cured, but a rational response to what we do. Because I finally saw clearly what we are, and I could not go back to being blind." The Canoness closed her eyes. "Then there is nothing more to discuss. You will be confined to a penitent's cell pending formal interrogation. The Ordos Dialogus will arrive within the week to begin the process. Until then, you will be given time to pray, to reflect, and to seek the Emperor's forgiveness for your faithlessness. I suggest you use that time well." The penitent's cell was exactly as I remembered from the one time I had been assigned to guard such a prisoner years before. A cube of stone 3 meters on each side, no windows, no furniture except a thin mat on the floor and a waste bucket in the corner. An aquila was carved into one wall, the 2-headed eagle symbol of the Imperium staring at me with blank stone eyes. A single lumen strip provided weak yellow light that never turned off. The door was solid plasteel with no viewport. I was left there in absolute solitude, with nothing but my thoughts and the weight of my broken faith. I tried to pray, not because I believed anyone was listening, but because the habit was so ingrained that I could not stop myself. The words came automatically, the litany of faith, the prayer of protection, the canticle of the Emperor's light. But they were just words now, sounds without meaning. And when I realized I was speaking to no one in an empty room, I stopped and sat in silence instead. How long did I sit there? Time lost meaning in that place. The lumen never changed. No sound penetrated from outside. Meals arrived through a slot at unpredictable intervals, protein paste and water, the minimum necessary to keep me alive for interrogation. I ate because my body demanded it, but I tasted nothing. I slept when exhaustion overcame me and woke to the same yellow light, the same stone walls, the same crushing awareness that I had no faith left to sustain me. The interrogators came on the 7th day, or perhaps the 10th. I had lost count. The Ordos Dialogus sent 2 sisters, ancient women whose entire lives had been spent studying matters of faith, doctrine, and heresy. They brought a chair and made me sit while they questioned me. They wanted to know everything when the doubt had started, what had caused it, whether I had been exposed to specific heresies, whether I had been in contact with known corrupted individuals, whether I had experienced any unusual dreams or visions. They asked the same questions dozens of ways, looking for inconsistencies, for signs of deeper corruption, for evidence that I had been actively turned rather than simply losing faith organically. I told them everything. The old preacher in the manufacturum, the woman in the penal colony, the accumulated weight of all the things I had seen and done in the Emperor's name, the slow erosion of certainty until nothing remained but hollow rituals and empty words. I confessed it all, not because I hoped for mercy, but because I no longer had the energy to lie. Let them know. Let them record it. Let them use my failure as a cautionary tale for other sisters. It did not matter anymore. They questioned me for hours at a stretch, breaking only when I became too exhausted to answer coherently. Then they would leave and return hours later to begin again. This continued for days. Eventually I lost track of what I had already told them and what I had not, my answers becoming confused, contradictory. They used this against me, suggesting that my confusion proved corruption had affected my mind, that something had been done to me, rather than acknowledging the simpler truth that I had simply stopped believing in the lies we told ourselves. Finally, they concluded their interrogation and presented their findings to the canoness. I was not present for this, but I heard the results when Sister Superior Mathilde came to my cell to deliver the judgment. She stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the light from the corridor beyond, and her voice was absolutely flat as she spoke. The Ordos Dialogus has completed their investigation. Their conclusion is that you show no signs of active corruption, no taint of chaos, no demonic influence, no exposure to specific heresies that might explain your condition. You have simply lost faith. The theologians have argued about the cause. Some believe you were always weak and merely concealed it well. Others think you were exposed to accumulated trauma that broke your spirit. But the cause is ultimately irrelevant. The result is the same. You cannot serve. You cannot be trusted. And you cannot be released, because your doubt might spread to others. So you will kill me, I said. It was not a question. The canoness has not yet decided. There are alternatives. Something in her tone made me look up, made me see past the silhouette to her face. She looked almost sick, her skin pale, her eyes refusing to meet mine. And in that moment I knew what she had come to tell me, and I felt ice flood my veins. No, I said. Not that. Please, Mathilde, for the love of the Emperor, not that. You have no right to invoke his name, she said quietly. Not anymore. And the decision has been made. You will be transferred to the mechanicus they have use for those who can no longer serve in their current form. The canoness has agreed to the arrangement. You will be processed within the week. She left before I could respond, the door sealing behind her with a hiss of pressurized air. I sat there in the yellow light and finally understood the full weight of what I had lost. They were not going to execute me. They were not going to grant me the mercy of death. They were going to turn me into a servitor. I knew what that meant. Every sister knew. Servitors were the lobotomized slave workers of the Imperium, humans whose minds had been surgically removed and replaced with simple cogitator systems, their bodies repurposed as biological machinery to perform tasks too complex for pure machines, but too dangerous or demeaning for valued citizens. I had seen servitors throughout my service, the maintenance units that repaired our armor, the lifter units that moved supplies, the gun servitors that served as automated defenses. I had never thought about what they had been before, who they had been, whether any awareness remained trapped inside their mutilated minds. Now I would become one of them. They would cut away everything that made me Celeste. My memories, my personality, my capacity for thought and choice and doubt, all of it would be removed as cleanly as cutting rotten flesh from a wound. What remained would be a biological drone, a thing that looked human but was not, an object to be used and discarded when it broke down. And somewhere deep inside what remained of my brain, would a fragment of consciousness persist? Would I be aware, trapped inside a body I could not control, forced to watch through eyes that were no longer mine as my hands performed tasks I did not choose? Or would it be a true death, a complete erasure, nothing of me remaining except meat and bone repurposed to serve? I did not know which option was worse. They came for me 2 days later. Tech priests of the Adeptus Mechanicus, their robes red as dried blood, their bodies more machine than flesh. They did not speak to me except to confirm my designation number. I was no longer Sister Celeste. I was Unit 7743 Sigma, a resource to be processed and deployed as needed. They loaded me onto a transport and took me to the Mechanicus facility on the far side of the convent's compound, a building of grey metal and harsh white lumens where servitors were maintained and repaired. The processing chamber was clinically clean, everything white tile and chrome surfaces. They strapped me to a surgical table, my arms and legs immobilized, my head locked in a brace that prevented even the smallest movement. A tech priest loomed over me, his face hidden behind a rebreather mask, his eyes replaced with augmetic optics that clicked and whirred as they focused on me. He carried a data slate and began reading from it in lingua technis, the machine language of his order, as if I were not there at all, as if I were already an object rather than a person. I tried to pray. One last time, I tried to reach out to the Emperor I no longer believed in, tried to find some scrap of faith that might sustain me through what was coming. But there was nothing. No divine presence. No comforting certainty. Just the cold metal of the surgical table and the clicking of augmetic eyes, and the absolute knowledge that no one was listening, no one was watching, no one cared what happened to me at all. The tech priest finished his recitation and turned to his instruments. I saw him select a drill, saw him test its motor, heard it whine to life with a sound that made my teeth ache. He positioned it carefully above my right temple, and I understood that this was the beginning. He would drill through my skull to access my brain, and then they would cut away everything that made me human, everything that made me me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to beg. I wanted to tell them I had changed my mind, that I would recant everything, that I would force myself to believe anything they wanted if they would just stop. But my mouth would not open. Some remaining fragment of pride or stubbornness or simple exhaustion kept my jaws locked shut. I would not give them the satisfaction of hearing me break. I would not plead with people who had already decided I was not worth saving. The drill touched my temple. I felt the pressure, felt the bit beginning to turn, felt the first burning touch of metal against skin. And then, the lights went out. Every lumen in the facility died simultaneously, plunging us into absolute darkness. The drill stopped. I heard the tech priest make a startled sound in lingua technis, heard him fumbling for something. Emergency lumens flickered on, bathing everything in red light. And in that red illumination, I saw her. The woman from the penal colony stood in the doorway of the processing chamber. She was not alone. The prisoners who had followed her stood behind her in silent ranks, their faces calm, their eyes reflecting the red light like animals' eyes caught in lumens. They should not have been here. They should not have been able to breach a mechanicus facility. But here they were nonetheless, impossible and real. I told you the Imperium does not permit mercy, she said, walking toward my table. But that does not mean mercy does not exist. I came to offer it one last time, Celeste. Will you accept? The tech priest moved to stop her. She gestured, and he froze mid-step, locked in place like a statue. She approached my table, began releasing the straps that held me down. I was free. I could move. I could run, though I had nowhere to run to. I could fight, though I had nothing to fight with. I could choose, for perhaps the final time in my life, what would happen next. If I come with you, I said, my voice hoarse from screaming I did not remember doing. What happens? What do you want from me? Nothing you do not wish to give, she said. I am not recruiting soldiers for chaos, whatever the Imperium believes. I am simply offering refuge to those who can no longer survive within the system. Come with us, live free of the Imperium's demands, ask questions without fear of execution, or stay and let them finish what they started. The choice is yours. It was not really a choice. I knew that. I could stay and be lobotomized, turned into a servitor, my mind destroyed and my body enslaved, or I could go with her and become, what? A heretic? A traitor? Something worse? I did not know. But at least I would be conscious. At least I would remain myself, for whatever that was worth. I left the table. I followed her out of the processing chamber, past the frozen tech priest, through corridors that should have been full of guards but were mysteriously empty. Her followers surrounded me, guided me, kept me moving when I wanted to collapse from exhaustion and despair. We reached a waiting transport not Imperial, something else, unmarked and ancient, and climbed aboard. As we lifted off from the convent, I looked back through the viewport and saw my entire former life contained in that compound of stone and metal. The chapel, where I had prayed for 16 years, the training yards where I had learned to kill, the armory where my weapons were stored, the cells where my sisters slept, all of it falling away beneath us as we rose into the atmosphere, all of it becoming smaller and more distant, until it was just one more grey smudge on a planet full of grey smudges, unremarkable and meaningless. I have been with the woman, she says her name is Miriam, though I do not know if I believe her for 3 months now. We move constantly, never staying anywhere long enough for the Imperium to find us. The others in our group are all like me people, who could not make themselves believe. who ask the wrong questions, who refuse to accept the comfortable lies. We are not a chaos cult, whatever the Imperium claims. We worship nothing. We serve no dark gods. We simply exist outside the system, trying to live as best we can in the spaces between the Imperium's attention. But I am still damned. I know this, not because I have fallen to chaos, but because I have fallen from faith, and in the Imperium there is no redemption for that sin. I will never be a sister of battle again. I will never wear the armor, or speak the prayers, or stand beside my former sisters in battle. That life is gone, burned away as surely as if they had completed the lobotomy and turned me into a servitor. I am dead to them. I am dead to the Imperium. I am dead to the Emperor I no longer believe in. And yet I am alive. I wake each day in whatever shelter we have found. I eat food that is not consecrated. I speak words that are not prayers. I exist without purpose or meaning beyond simple survival, without the certainty that once sustained me, without faith to fill the void where faith used to live. It is a hollow existence, empty, but it is mine. I chose it. Or perhaps it chose me. Perhaps this was always what I was meant to become, not a sister of battle but a cautionary tale, an example of what happens when faith fails and nothing rises to replace it. I still dream sometimes of the old preacher in the manufacturum. In my dreams, he is still standing on his makeshift pulpit with his arms outstretched, still looking at me with infinite sadness, still saying without words that the Emperor has forgotten us all. And when I wake from these dreams in the cold darkness of whatever shelter we have found, I know that he was right. The Emperor has forgotten us. If he ever knew we existed at all, we are nothing to him, not his beloved children, but simply more resources to be consumed, more fuel for the endless engine of the Imperium, more bodies to be ground into paste and called sacred. This is what happens when a sister of battle loses her faith. She does not become a daemon or a heretic or a servant of chaos. She simply becomes nothing, empty, hollow, a shell that still looks human but has nothing inside except the echoing memory of certainty that will never return. She survives, if you can call it survival, knowing that she can never go back but having nowhere to go forward to. She exists in the space between damnations, belonging to neither the Imperium nor its enemies, faithful to nothing and trusted by no one. I tell myself sometimes that this is freedom, that being free from the Imperium's demands, free from the constant weight of faith and duty and service, is worth the price I have paid. But I know I am lying to myself. There is no freedom here. There is only a different kind of prison, one without walls but equally inescapable, the prison of consciousness without purpose, of life without meaning, of existence without belief in anything beyond the next day's survival. If you are reading this, if somehow this confession has reached you, then you already know how this story ends. I will die. Perhaps the Imperium will find us eventually, and I will burn as a heretic, my ashes scattered to the void. Perhaps I will simply fade away, my body giving out from accumulated trauma and exhaustion. Perhaps something worse will happen, some fate I cannot yet imagine. But I will die, and when I do, there will be no glory, no purpose, no meaning. My name will be forgotten, if it is remembered at all, and my death will change nothing. The Imperium will continue. The Adepta Sororitas will continue. The Emperor will continue not caring whether any of us live or die. And somewhere, in some manufacturum or penal colony or underhive settlement, another sister will begin to doubt, will see what I saw, will feel her faith begin to crack, and she will face the same choice I faced: serve the lie or embrace the emptiness, and no matter which she chooses, she will be damned. This is the truth the Imperium does not speak. This is the secret hidden beneath all the prayers and rituals and professions of faith. There is no salvation. There is no divine love. There is no greater purpose or meaning. There is only the machine, vast and hungry and eternal, consuming everything it touches and calling the consumption holy. We are all servitors in the end, whether they perform the surgery or not. We are all meat and bone repurposed to serve. all consciousness erased or ignored, all individuality ground away until nothing remains but the function we perform. I was Sister Celeste of the Order of the Bleeding Rose. I served the Emperor for 16 years. I killed in his name. I died for his glory, though my heart still beats. This is my confession. This is my testimony. This is what happens when faith fails and nothing rises to replace it. The Emperor does not protect. The Emperor does not care. The Emperor is dead, or never existed, or has simply forgotten that we are here at all, and we continue serving anyway, continue killing and dying and calling it righteous, continue feeding ourselves into the machine that will inevitably destroy us, continue believing because the alternative admitting that it has all been meaningless, that we have suffered for nothing, that our faith was a lie we told ourselves to make the horror bearable is worse than any death. I see that now. I understand, and I envy those who do not, those who can still believe, still find comfort in the prayers and rituals, still convince themselves that their suffering serves some greater purpose. I envy my former sisters their faith, even knowing it is false, because at least it gives them something to hold on to in the darkness. I have nothing. I am nothing. I am the answer to a question no one should ask. What happens when you stop believing? You become a ghost, haunting the margins of a universe that has no place for you, neither dead nor alive, neither faithful nor corrupted, neither saved nor damned, but simply lost, forever faithless, forever hollow. And the worst part, the cruelest truth of all, is that I am still conscious. I still think, I still feel, I still suffer. But now my suffering has no meaning, no purpose, no redemption. It is just suffering, pure and simple, the existence of awareness in a universe that does not care whether I exist at all. This is my fate. This is my damnation. This is what I have become. And if you are reading this, if you have followed my story to its conclusion, then know that this could be you. This could be any of us. We are all one moment of clarity away from seeing the truth. We are all one question away from doubt. We are all one breath away from the void. The Emperor protects, they say. But from this, from the knowledge that he does not exist, that we serve a corpse on a throne, that our faith is a shield against nothing but the reality of our own meaninglessness, from this, there is no protection. From this, there is no escape. There is only the endless fall into certainty's absence, the slow dissolution of everything we thought we knew, until nothing remains but the hollow echo of prayers that no one hears. I am Sister Celeste. I was faithful once. Now I am nothing but this testimony, these words, this warning to those who might follow. Do not ask the questions I asked. Do not see what I saw. Do not think what I thought. Because once you start, you cannot stop. Once doubt enters, faith cannot return. And without faith, there is only this, the endless empty space where certainty used to live, the cold knowledge that we are alone, that we have always been alone, that the Emperor's love was a story we told ourselves in the dark to make the horror bearable. But the horror remains, it always remains, and no amount of faith, no depth of belief, no fervor of prayer can make it anything other than what it is, the simple truth that we are all falling through darkness, believing we are flying, and the ground is coming whether we acknowledge it or not. This is the end. This is all there is. This is what happens when a sister of battle loses her faith. She becomes a warning, a cautionary tale, a ghost story told to frighten the faithful into maintaining their belief. She becomes less than nothing, a void where certainty used to be, a hollow space that even darkness cannot fill. I am that void. I am that space. I am the question no one should ask and the answer everyone fears. I am what remains when faith is burned away and nothing rises from the ashes. I am the price of seeing clearly in a universe built on lies. I am faithless. I am forsaken. I am forgotten. And I will never, ever believe again.